Welcome everyone to our 4-part Shelter in Faith series. You've joined our last installment in the series, Part 4, Meaning and Productivity. This is a partnership between the Santa Cruz Public Libraries and the Watsonville Public Library. We have just a few housekeeping slides, and then I'll turn it over to the City of Watsonville's Mayor, Rebecca Garcia, and our guests for today. This meeting is being recorded. Your microphone is muted for the entire presentation. You do not need a microphone, a camera, or a screen if you only want to listen to the meeting, as this meeting is accessible by landline or mobile phone. If you need assistance, please call the library's telephone information line at 1-831-427-7713. To join this presentation using a telephone only, dial any of the following numbers. I'll read just a couple to you. 1-669-900-6833 or 1-301-715-8592. You'll then need to enter the webinar ID of 924-1195-0403 and then press the pound sign or the number sign. Now we are taking questions or comments. The Q&A period will begin at about 4 p.m. If you're joining by a computer or a larger mobile device, you'll see the Q&A icon on the attendee control bar. Tapping on the icon allows you to type your question or your comment. If you have a question for a specific panelist, please type their name in ahead of your question. On that attendee control bar, on the lower left corner, you'll see audio settings. Then you'll see the Q&A icon, and then in the right-hand corner in red letters, you'll see Leave Meeting. Once the presentation begins, if you're joining by a computer, to see all of the panelists, you may need to use that Zoom control bar again and select Gallery View. Depending on the size of your mobile device screen, you may need to scroll over to view whomever's speaking. If you are accessing this meeting via the web browser only, you will not see all of the panelists at one time. You'll only see the panelists speaking. We're now going to transition to the panelists in that gallery view. Please stand by. Mayor Garcia, over to you.
I want to welcome you. My name is Rebecca Garcia. I was born and raised in Watsonville. I currently represent District 5 in the city of Watsonville, and currently I'm the mayor of Watsonville. So I do want to welcome our distinguished panelists and welcome those of you who are viewing us via Zoom, and also to those of you who are listening to us on the telephone. We find ourselves in this very peculiar time in history where the world is being threatened by a virus that requires a social response to slow its impact. Individuals and communities throughout the world have chosen to shelter in place in the interest of protecting those who are most vulnerable and to do their part in flattening the curve. And while these precautions are necessary, we are experiencing severe local and global economic impacts as a result. Unemployment rates are spiking. Many small businesses are struggling to keep their businesses afloat. And those of us fortunate enough to still be working are also feeling insecure about the future. The Santa Cruz Public Libraries and Watsonville Public Library have invited several local leaders representing diverse faith traditions to help us give voice and a constructive perspective to the relevant concerns and questions our community is facing. For the fourth and final part of this series, we will be discussing the relevant topic of meaning and productivity while sheltering in place. Our distinguished panelists include the Venerable Tenzin Chogkyi, Aisha Charves, a member of the Islamic Center, the Reverend Robin Mathews-Johnson, and Father Simas. We will begin by asking each of the panelists to please tell us about yourself and the faith tradition or community you are representing. And let's begin with the Venerable Tenzin.
Thank you, Rebecca. So my name's Venerable Tenzin Chogkyi, and I'm a Buddhist monastic living at Land of Medicine Buddha in Soquel. teaching, living and teaching here, teaching Buddhist philosophy and meditation. I also teach a couple of secular programs, one called Cultivating Emotional Balance and one called Compassion Cultivation Training, that use Buddhist-based contemplative techniques for dealing with emotions on the one hand and for training in compassion. I also teach in prisons, and for the last 14 years taught in prisons in various countries, and at the moment have 2 groups at the Correctional Training Facility in Soledad. So thank you.
Thank you. Aisha, let's go with you.
Thank you very much. My name is Aisha, and I'm a Sunni Muslim. I also follow various Sufi paths, and of course, I respect my Shia siblings in faith. As a Muslim, I've wanted to learn Arabic for years. So about 14 years ago, I started studying in the university and have had the great honor to study both here in the US and abroad. I was able to study fiqh, which is Islamic jurisprudence or law. While abroad, I specialized in Maliki fiqh, a specific kind of Islamic law. As a feminist, it's been my passion to research women's leadership and social justice in Islam. And I received a Fulbright when I graduated from college, which allowed me to go and research women's leadership and social change in Abu Dhabi and Dubai. I'm a member of the community of the Islamic Center of Santa Cruz, and I also teach Sunday school there when our lives are a little more normal and we're not locked down at home.
Thank you very much. And we'll continue with the Reverend Robin.
My name is Reverend Robin Mathews-Johnson, and I'm honored to be part of this live online panel discussion here with Shelter in Faith. You can call me Pastora Robin. That's what my parishioners call me. I've been the pastor for over almost 21 years, come July 1st. And in that capacity, I run the church, I lead worship, and I work with other folks within the church and community to share our faith and just live out our Christian faith. I'm a progressive person. Our church is what they call reconciling within the United Methodist Church. There are 12.5 million United Methodists all over the world and in 136 countries. But our church is what they call reconciling, which means we're pro-LGBTQ, and we support, we welcome all to worship with us and to live out their faith. I'm married to a man that works in agriculture and who is from Hollister, and I have 2 adult daughters and 2 perfect grandchildren. And I'm delighted to be here. And may I call you Mayor Garcia or Mayor Rebecca?
You can call me Rebecca.
Rebecca, thank you.
Okay, and we'll go on with Father Jason.
Hello, everyone out there. I'm here in Watsonville, California. I'm St. Patrick's Parish, and I'm 45 years old. I've been a priest for 5 years. I'm currently the administrator, which is like a stand-in place for our pastor here. And I've been here for about 14 months as administrator. I was in the U.S. Army before I went to seminary. The formation to become a priest for me was 5.5 years of school and practical experiences. Before that, I was in the Army, the U.S. Army, and served there for 4 years as a chaplain assistant. And I left as a sergeant, and I was deployed once to Iraq with them. Before that, I was interested in computer science. I was a software engineer for about 6 months, and before that, I was studying to get a doctorate degree in computer science. I have 3 master's degrees, 1 in computer science, 1 in theology, and 1 in divinity. I have a bachelor's degree in philosophy and computer science. For me, I became serious about my Christian faith when I was 19. Quickly became a fully initiated Catholic after that. I wasn't raised Catholic, I felt led to it, and I also was an atheist for a while. So I'm very happy to be here. I have prepared some answers, I'm sure all the other panelists. So I'm sure we're all excited to get started.
Thank you.
And Father Simas, this is the facilitator. We are having trouble with your mic. If you could please troubleshoot on your end, that would be great. There's quite a lot of feedback and interference. Sorry for the delay. Continue on, Mayor Garcia.
Okay, we're going to start with our first question, and I'll direct it to Aisha first. Since shelter in place has gone into effect, many businesses have closed or reduced their operations, and individuals are unexpectedly finding themselves unemployed or working in different ways. How has this impacted your faith community? Aisha?
Well, it's quite an interesting month to ask a Muslim this, because it's the holy month of Ramadan, where we fast from just before sunrise until sunset. And normally this also includes folks going to the mosque to break their fast, particularly in the US, where people's families might live farther. We become a lot more familial and close to our tight-knit community. We have only one mosque in Santa Cruz, and there's one in Watsonville. So our communities tend to be really tight. We often get together to break fast, which tonight will be at 8:09 p.m. if you all want to think of me then. And so it's really made a huge difference. We aren't meeting every day. After folks eat, they also often go to the mosque, and you stand in congregational prayer for hours every night while someone reads the Quran. The goal is to get through the recitation of the entire Quran during the month, and we can't do that in person this month. So it's been quite a different Ramadan. I think in positive ways, a lot of parents are talking about how their college kids are back home. And that's been great, I think, for families, because now instead of the kids being away from at college and only coming home on the weekends for Ramadan, and they're home all the time, with folks who get to work from home or might be collecting unemployment, inshallah, it's provided us with a lot more flexible schedule, which has sort of been nice for folks like me who like to stay up too late and then sleep in for part of the day. So I think, I mean, maybe I'm a very glass half full kind of person, but we're making the best of what we can, and it's been an interesting Ramadan for sure.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's continue with Reverend Robin.
Well, I'd say sheltering in place and the pandemic have affected us in all ways. It's definitely a challenge. That Monday when the Santa Cruz County was issuing the order that night at midnight we were going to be shut down, we gathered our staff. We have a lot of outreach programs. We work with various programs like Second Harvest Food Bank and Food for Families, and we give away food. So we had this fresh food, and so we divided up all the fresh produce and food that we had and divided it up and gave it to our staff. And then what we did, and we immediately put all our staff, we continued their pay. We weren't sure at that point that we could even get access to our payroll system, but we paid all our staff, and we're continuing to pay our staff, all the existing staff, even though most of us are not able to work. I'm actually working, this is my kitchen area. I'm working at home, and we have people coming into the building to make sure it's safe and payroll and so on. But that was the first thing, is to make sure our staff are taken care of. We work with a lot of families in poverty in the Watsonville area, and it's been particularly devastating, both being stuck at home, the staff and different people that have a lot of young children, they've lost their daycare and their school, and trying to be a mom and do all that and also work has been extremely challenging. So we're having to dig deep within our own, our faith, and to figure out new ways to be together in community when we can't hug and touch each other.
Mayor Garcia, why don't we move on? Pastora Robin did let me know that she was having internet trouble today.
Father Jason.
Okay, first of all, can I ask, can you hear me better? Is it better at all?
No.
Well, I don't know what to do except to try to go to my cell phone. So.
Well, I would ask you to continue, and we will understand whatever we can understand.
So I count 1, 2, 3, 4. Did you hear what I said then?
1, 2, 3, 4,
Okay.
but not clearly.
Clearly, okay. Well, I'll try to talk as closely as I can to the microphone. I don't know if that's going to help. But I would say that our parish has not been immune to the effects of the virus. Of course, financially, it means we're missing about $5,000 a week of income that we normally would have. We've had to dip into our savings during this time. I'm about $75,000 negative so far. That was money that we were saving to rebuild one of our buildings here that has been hurt since the 1989 earthquake. We still have the money to rebuild it. And so that's going to set us back a little bit. We did get approved for the Paycheck Protection Program recently, and so we will have 60 days of respite. Thank you for that, to everyone who supported that. And I would say, too, that for the people out there, the Christian faith is one where it's set up to be able to deal with any physical difficulty, whether it be illness or financial hardship, or whether it be natural disaster. Any of these things, the Christian and Catholic faith is set up to endure suffering. The physical, the visible, the tangible is not as important as the invisible and the spiritual. And so we know this because the symbol of our faith is the cross. This is the primary symbol of the faith. We see Jesus himself suffering on the cross. And what can we gain from that? We know we're going to suffer. This is going to be this way. We're going to suffer all sorts of things until he comes again. But the question is, how do you live through those times? Are we going to become mean and nasty and hateful and selfish, or do we maintain our faith and show forth our love? And so this is something that the faith provides. You saw Jesus on the cross, as everyone's trying to hurt him and yell at him and mock him, he wished no ill will of anyone. So we continue to suffer through this, trying to be good neighbors to everyone. And I'll just leave us with this one scripture quote from 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 18.
Father Simas, we are missing too much of what you have to say. Is there any way that you would be willing to call in?
Yeah, that would be easy.
Okay, why don't we continue, and let's go with the Venerable Tenzin.
Yeah, thank you so much. So yes, this has had a huge impact on our faith community. In the very local level, we live in a residential community that sponsors our own retreats and also operates as a conference center, and that's our main source of income. So all of that just stopped literally overnight. So we've been kind of scrambling to move all of our teachings onto Zoom, which is one thing. Our cooks have been making takeaway food that people can come and pick up, which is not something we did before. That's turned out to be really successful, but it's very hard with a big residential facility with, no groups coming in, possibly for the rest of 2020. So that's been a big impact. And then of course, the students that come to the center have been impacted, as everyone has. Many of them, unfortunately, furloughed, lost their jobs, dealing with, homeschooling in addition to working from home. So that's been really hard. It's interesting, my friends of other faith communities, of course, during the lockdown have you know, the holidays of Passover and Easter and Ramadan have all happened since the lockdown. And then there's been very touching stories of people having Easter dinners and Passovers on Zoom with all of their relatives from all over. I was at an iftar dinner on Zoom last week, which was beautiful. One of the things that happens, though, a lot of students are the only one in their family that's Buddhist. So that sense of community really comes from coming to the Buddhist center to meditate and, you know, have classes with their friends. It's not really a family, necessarily a family activity. So I've noticed a lot of the students are really missing that sense of community. We've tried to replicate it on Zoom, but the Zoomiverse is a really different world than having warm bodies sitting in a circle in a room. So who knows when that'll happen again. But I know the students appreciate what we're doing on Zoom, but sort of miss the community feeling as well. Yeah, thank you.
Well, it sounds that there has been a really an impact on all the faith community, but it sounds that you are all responding very positively to your congregation. So congratulations to you for that. We'll move on to our next question, and I'll start with the Reverend Robin. When meeting people for the first time, we often start a conversation by asking them, "What do you do?" As simple as this question might seem, it provides insight into the high value American culture places on the idea of productivity and the meaning we derive from it. In light of this, how does your faith tradition or community begin conversation, prayers, or meditative practices, and why is that important? Reverend?
Can you hear me now? Hold
Yes.
on just a minute. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yes.
Good. We have something called Passing of the Peace, and Rebecca, you may have it in your church too.
Yes, we do.
What happens is in the, I'm losing my video, but that's okay. In the middle of worship service, everything grinds to a halt, and we stand up and start shaking hands and hugging one another, and we get out of our pews, and just it's chaos in the middle of the service, and it's a celebration of the peace. And Passing of the Peace is something that we do that is based on the Bible. Jesus said, when you're offering a gift at the altar, remember, if your brother has something against you, leave your offering there before the altar and go. And also Jesus said, "Peace I leave you, my peace I give you." So our way of greeting each other traditionally is in person, right up front and personal, with the passing of the peace. And it's a way of showing our love for one another and our acceptance of those who are visiting and together. As Paul in his letters in the Bible New Testament said, "Grace to you." And so we offer that, and that's how we greet one another. And that's one of the things that we cannot do directly. We have to do it in new ways online.
Okay, thank you.
And Pastoral Robin, we are having a trouble hearing your audio as well.
Oh dear. Sorry about that. I switched. I no longer have internet. I've switched to my phone, and that's why I'm trying to get through that way. Sorry about that.
Well, that's okay. Why don't you just leave your audio on and leave your video off, and let's see if things improve.
Okay.
Okay.
You got it.
We'll continue with Father Jason, and the question that we're being asked in terms of the high value American culture places on the idea of productivity and the meaning and meaning. And now with so many people unemployed, how does your faith tradition or community begin conversation, prayers, or meditative practices? And why is that important?
Right. So has my audio improved at all?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
good.
Okay.
All right, so switched locations, and here we go, rebooted the computer. So thank you, everyone, and sorry. I had some really awesome things that I said. Just know that. I'm just kidding. Well, okay, so, you know, this question of how do we, you know, in our society, if our culture is set up so that our worth and our self-value is based on what we do for a living or how productive we are. Well, you know, this is something that every week when our people come to Mass, you know, they're hearing a different story. We're telling them that no matter what they do, no matter how productive they are or are not, that the foundation of their self-worth is that God loves them, that God loves them. And this is something that cannot be erased. There's not something that you can do that would erase the love of God from you. So your self-worth is not based on what you're doing on a daily basis. Now, we try to get people to move past that, you know, and it can be difficult because in our culture, you know, we get used to like buying things, and we get used to when they stop working, what do we do with something that we bought? We throw it away. And so it has no more value or worth to us, and we just throw it away and we get a different one. And we think people are going to do that to us. If we're not producing, if we're not productive, if we're not useful, we don't have any value and someone's going to throw us away. That's not true, you know. And the Catholic Church has a wonderfully long and strong tradition of from conception until natural death, from the womb to the tomb, every human being is equally valuable. And that's because God chooses to make them valuable. I would just add something here. This is from, I think it's Jeremiah chapter 1, verse 5. We hear, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you." So this is a close personal relationship that God wants to have with each and every person, regardless, before they even started anything, doing anything. And I dedicated you, a prophet to the nations I appointed you. And we hear also St. Paul say, "But God proves his love for us, and that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us." So even if we're doing things completely opposite of what's productive, some things that are destructive, God still loves you and you still have value. So we want, you know, everyone to receive this message, and so that we don't fall into this trap of thinking that we're only productive, we're only valuable, and we only have meaning if we're useful. We want everybody to know we love our elders. You know, you would never say to your grandma, "Oh, well, grandma's not very helpful around the house anymore. She's not valuable." Oh, heck no. You know as well as I do that what is love is more important than productivity.
We'll go on with Venerable Tenzin.
Thank you. So yes, it's interesting in Buddhist practice, whether it's a meditation session or a teaching or even a study period, we always spend a little bit of time at the very beginning setting our intention for the activity, whatever it is, with just a couple of moments of reflection. So reflecting on our intention, reflecting on our motivation for what we're doing. We said this is really, really important for whatever benefit we get out of the activity. It doesn't matter as much what we do, it's what is our intention going into that activity. And so it's something that we really meditate on kind of in the morning every day. We're advised to set our intention before we engage in anything, and then keep kind of checking our intention throughout the day. So it doesn't really matter so much what we're doing, it's the motivation behind it. So that's kind of a fundamental practice that we have in Buddhism. And it's interesting, when I was contemplating this question, I was thinking, there's students I've known for years. I have no idea what they do for a living, but I'm intimately connected with their motivation and their spiritual life and what brought them to practice. And I have no idea what they do between 9 and 5, Monday through Friday, because what's important to us and our relationship is their spiritual practice. Also in Buddhism, you know, the idea of kind of productivity that comes from things like, you know, how much money do you make, or how many possessions do you have, or even your fame or your reputation. In Buddhism, there's so much of an emphasis of developing inner qualities. In fact, the word that's used to refer to a Buddhist in the Tibetan language literally means inner being. So it points to someone who's looking for the sources of happiness from within and not externally. And so we say real happiness comes from developing our compassion, developing our kindness, developing our wisdom. And then with those qualities, kind of bringing that energy or bringing those qualities to the world. So directionally, instead of happiness coming from what we can get from the world, happiness comes from what we're developing inside and what we can bring to the world. So several people in the last couple of weeks, you know, several students in various classes and my friends, you know, this phrase of Buddhism was meant for these times keeps coming up over and over and over again, because that shift, of course, you know, it doesn't mean that we don't enjoy things. It doesn't mean that we don't have careers and so forth. But, you know, we're already quite well trained in looking at different ways for our sense of meaning and happiness and productivity for more of our inner life rather than our outer life. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's continue with Aisha.
Wow, thank you so much, Tenzin. I really appreciated that. And I actually had to make a little note because I was like, oh, intention, that's super important to us too. I really enjoyed your answer. Thank you so much. When Muslims greet each other, we say Assalamu alaikum, which means peace be upon you. And the other person says Walaikum assalam, and peace also be on you. As someone who was raised in a more Christian tradition, I always loved this because it reminded me of how Jesus says to greet each other with peace. And that's just something I absolutely love in our community. Another thing that we say before we do anything, when we set our intention, we say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, which means in the name of God, who's merciful and kind. And whenever I talk to my Sunday school kids about this, I remind them that sometimes as humans, we're harder on ourselves or harder on other people, but Allah is merciful and kind. And we say it before we do anything, before you take a drink of water, when you walk in your house, when you greet your spouse, when you open the Quran. So I think one of my favorite things is this reminder and this returning for us to recall that God is merciful and kind. And side note, as a feminist, one of my favorite things in this phrase, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, is it uses two of the names of God. We believe that God has, you know, perhaps countless names, but certainly 99, and they each mean something. And the name, so Rahman and Rahim, Rahim actually means womb. And it's one of the many names of Allah that are actually feminine in nature, because we don't believe that God has a specific gender, but rather sort of encompasses all of the genders.
Very good. And so what I'm hearing is that we have to all believe that we are valuable human beings at all time, because we do have good intentions, motivation, and peace. So thank you for that. Our next question, I'll start off with Father Jason. In times of unemployment or crisis, people often reevaluate their lives and the work they do. What if someone has come to realize that the type of work they've been doing hasn't been satisfactorily meaningful to them and would like to do something different, but may not even know what that something is? Are there any empowering stories or practices, such as acts of service from your faith tradition, that could help individuals discover the type of work that would be most meaningful to them? Father Jason?
All right, thank you. So, you know, this is something that would be naturally would come up. You know, if you lose your job and then you start asking yourself, well, you know, I wasn't really happy in that position anyway. Let me try to do what I love. You know, we hear that kind of mantra, do what you love. And if you're doing what you love, then it's not work. You know, it's like, it's what you love. And it's, so that's wonderful. An idea, and for those people who can find that, that's a wonderful blessing in their lives today. But not everybody is going to be this fortunate. I would say that there's going to be some people that are going to just take whatever is going to be available to them. And how do we help those people find meaning? You know, like if the only job I can get at any particular time is something I really don't want to do. can I still find meaning and happiness in that work? And we have a couple things for that. One is that there's a difference between what you do, like your occupation, and what your vocation is. There's a difference between your work and your ministry. And everybody has a ministry. And I would say that most people, their ministry is going to be the married life. You know, their ministry is to show forth love in their home, in their family, as a father, as a husband, as a wife, as a mother, as a child. Bringing love into the world, this is the number one thing you can do. It's not your job. It's not, you know, how many things I can produce that people really, really want to buy. It's how much love can you bring into the world, you know, through God. And so this is going to be in your vocation. And so most people have a vocation to married life and to, you know, producing children for the kingdom of God. So one thing is just realizing that you might already be totally satisfied in no matter what work you have, however you earn your money, providing for your family, loving your family, having the light of God shine forth in your home. This is your job. This is your work. This is much more important than how you get that money. The second thing I would say is Jesus seems to go out of his way to make sure that we realize that we are important and that we can be happy doing absolutely anything, from the most humble of jobs. And so he gives us two examples. And one is from John chapter 13. Jesus washes the feet of his disciples. He's cool being, hey, you know, one of the dirtiest parts of the body. He is cool bending down, taking off his, you know, his good clothes and washing people's feet with them. And so he provides this humble service, and he says to his disciples, you know, it says in the scripture, so during supper, fully aware that the Father had put everything into his power and that he had come from God and was returning to God, he rose from supper, took off his outer garments. He took a towel and tied it around his waist. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and dry them with the towel around his waist. When he had washed their feet and put his garments back on and reclined at table again, he said to them, do you realize what I have done for you? He just brought dignity to any kind of work, is what he did for us. Do you realize what I've done? You call me teacher and master, and rightly so, for indeed I am. If I therefore, the master and teacher, have washed your feet, you ought to wash one another's feet as well. I have given you a model to follow, so that I have done for you, you should also do. Anyone, any kind of work can find peace and happiness and joy in that, because that's not who they are. Who they are is the ministry and the love that they bring into the world. The other thing is that he does do, did you know that he cooks for people? You know, he was in the food service industry. So, you know, he fed the 5,000 people. We all know that miracle story, I would think. And also, not only that, but after he rose from the dead, we're told that, you know, Peter was fishing with some of the other disciples, and there was Jesus making a fire, so that after they finished fishing, they sat down and they grilled fish together and made breakfast. So he was preparing the fire for the people, you know, to come and cook on. So we just know that he brings dignity to any kind of work. So we don't want people to think that you have to find the certain thing in order to be happy in life. You need to find your ministry, your vocation, and then, you know, how you provide for your family and those kinds of things. Those are less important.
Very good. Okay, let's go on with the Venerable Tenzin.
Thank you. So yeah, it's interesting in Buddhism, when people start studying, there's a practice that at first seems kind of shocking. And what we do on a daily basis, often serious practitioners do a death awareness meditation. So we're trained in meditating on the fact that our death is certain to come. We have no idea when it's going to be. So we better do the most important thing and quit procrastinating. And so when you do this meditation well, instead of being depressing or morbid, it actually is really energizing, you know, and Father Jason just mentioned, you know, these things, if somebody will have, maybe get a diagnosis of cancer or something, and then like give up their corporate job to sail around the world or something like that. So this is kind of the spiritual equivalent of reprioritizing your life. And many of my friends and I have been talking recently and saying, this is a collective death awareness meditation. You don't have to be Buddhist. We're all kind of having this awakening experience of like, wow, life is really uncertain. And I think that's what's resulting in a lot of people kind of thinking and reprioritizing their lives. So I'll often have students come to me and ask, they feel called to serve. Maybe they've been living a life that's just sort of, going down the expected path. And then they decide, oh, I really want to give back. I want to make the world a better place. I want to serve. So often they'll come to me and they say, okay, you do all these things. So is it like hospice, prisons, children, and like, what's the hierarchy? And I go, figure out what skills you have, what you love to do, what kind of community really calls to you, and then go do that. There isn't any kind of absolute hierarchy of like what you should do. And I always caution people and say, if should is the verb in the sentence, kind of rethink your whole agenda, because it's not so great to do something out of that dutifulness. One of my favorite quotes, it's not a Buddhist master, it's actually a Christian pastor and civil rights leader, Reverend Howard Thurman, famously said, don't ask what the world needs, ask what you need to come alive, because what the world needs is people who've come alive. So that's usually the advice that I give to people when they're kind of trying to figure out how to offer service or how to do something meaningful. It's like, and sometimes they need to just experiment and do a bunch of different things, which is what I did. And then I found out teaching in men's prisons. Who knew? I didn't grow up as a small child thinking, oh, when I grow up, I really want to go into maximum security men's prisons and teach them how to meditate. I had no idea, but somebody asked me to do it. And I did it because I was willing to try, and it turned out to be a great fit. So sometimes you need to you can't necessarily figure it all out ahead of time. It's good to just experiment and try, and then just see what really fits. And I always say, pay attention to your energy. Like if you feel energized from what you're doing, I think when we feel this dutiful, oh, I should be doing this, and then you feel kind of exhausted and burned out afterwards, forget it, don't do it. But when we find that sweet spot, that's kind of the merger of our skills and our abilities, our skills, our passion, and then a deserving community, there's just nothing like it. It's just this beautiful feeling of this deep kind of contentment that comes from that kind of service. So, don't feel shy about experimenting and trying different things until you get that feeling. Okay. Thank you.
Let's move on to Aisha.
Thank you. I really enjoyed all of these questions, and I think it's definitely the time that so many folks are asking themselves if they're happy at their job, if they are forced to look into new employment, what will they do going ahead? And Islam really says that anything can be an act of service. When we set our intentions, anything is an act of service. People who are serving fast food to somebody who's on the road and they don't have time, that's an act of service. Smile is charity. So we believe that when we have the right intentions behind something that we do, that anything can be an act of service. Now, whether people are going to be happy in what they're doing or satisfied with their work, sometimes personally, I think that my favorite thing about Ramadan is it makes us, because you don't get to eat and drink all day long, you kind of have to change your life a bit. We say that it's sort of a reset button for people. And I think one of the useful things that perhaps we're getting in this coronavirus, shelter in place, is it's sort of a reset button for all of us. Our regular life has changed. The way that we worked, the way that we interacted with each other, and the way our work used to be has changed entirely, and it gives us a chance to be appreciative for what we have if and when we return to it, and also just to realize the value in what we have. One time, Prophet Muhammad's daughter Fatima, who he loved very much, of course, asked him for a maid. She said she was tired of cleaning the house. Islam says that housework is not necessarily a wife's job. So she said, listen, I'd like a housemaid. And he said, Fatima, do you really want a housemaid? when instead you could repeat the names of Allah, give yourselves these sort of a meditation practice while you do it, and make this housework even more beneficial. It benefits you because you can take this time to sort of repeat the names of God over and over. And also you're doing a kind deed for your family. And she took his advice and decided to do that instead. And oftentimes we as collectively, right, we don't always value housework and motherhood or parenthood the same as we value going to an office or sort of a 9-to-5 job, but those are all jobs, and those are all really important jobs. And Islam says that parenting is perhaps one of the most important jobs, and that doesn't have to be necessarily for your own kids, right? We can also serve other people in our neighborhood. I can help my neighbors out and go shopping for them instead. And those are all not just things that we get money from, but things that we give back with.
Good. Okay. We'll continue now with Reverend Robin.
Yes, I enjoyed hearing all of you. I think I would add to that. I think of our basic Christian belief that we actually got from Moses as our Jewish ancestors, about that this is sacred space. And even in a pandemic, even in death, how do we find and recognize this as sacred space? And I think that's something that we strive for within our church, within our religion, but also a way to have the strength to deal with what's happening outside of us that's out of our control. We don't know how the pandemic is going to end. So what can we do now? And there's a great concept in, from the Apostle Paul about spiritual gifts. And so when we think about work, like I talk to people, some people have no education and some people have a lot of it and different backgrounds, but what gifts has God given you? What spiritual gifts are you blessed with? And sometimes it doesn't have anything necessarily to do with your educational or economic background. It really is, what has God blessed you with? And I believe that you can't really be happy until you know what those gifts are and are given an opportunity or take an opportunity to use them. You need to see, well, what has God given me? What gifts has God given me? And to discern that is a process of learning about ourselves and then trying out those various gifts in community together. So I think that that's a really important thing. And of course, our basic scripture about loving God with all our heart and soul and mind, and then loving others, loving your neighbor as yourself, and how to actually put that in practice when you can't even touch or talk to your neighbor or maybe call them. So everything we're doing, I think, is a way of getting back to the core of our faith and also finding that sacred place. How can we understand and be with God now, even if we're separated? How can we serve others in new, innovative ways? And some of the work, Rebecca, you mentioned this, so we've done a lot of work in the community with COPA, which is an organization with various faith groups working together in coalition on certain issues. We agree, it's not that we agree on every theological issue or formal issue, but that we can work together to set priorities and figure out a way that we can work, whether it's through Zoom meetings every week or emails or new innovative ways. And so it's been, it's definitely a challenge, and because of the pattern of our lives is so different, but I think that inner core of finding that sacred place where God has blessed us and how we can use those gifts in new ways.
Okay, thank you. Well, it seems what we need to do is reprioritize our lives and believe that everything that we do is an act of service. And if we believe that we can find the dignity, peace, happiness, and joy that we need. So I want to tell the audience that we have one more question for the panelists. And so I would ask you, if anyone has a question, to now go to question and answers that you'll find, and give us some questions so that we can answer them after we complete this last question. So with that, and I'm going to open this up to anyone. Is there a book or another resource you can recommend for our listeners to try today that is relevant to our topic of meaning and productivity? And because of time, I ask you to please limit yourself to one book or one resource. So who would like to start? Just raise your hand. Okay, Father Jason.
Just to not, okay. I would just say that if you go to the web on your phone or whatever, there's a list of resources. If you go to USCCB COVID resources, and this will be in a link after this thing. This will be uploaded to YouTube, and apparently they're going to email links or something to these resources, so it'll be there. But there's a lot of resources. There's a daily scripture that can be mailed to you. There's morning and evening prayer that's available. On our website at stpatricks.org, you can get like a Netflix, like a Christian Catholic Netflix called forum.org for free. And so the parish is paying $2,000 a year for this, and anyone in the area can sign up for this. And there's Bible studies and movies about saints and movies about baptism, classes on baptism. Forum.org. Just go to our website at stpatricks.org.
Okay, so there we have one example of resources. Who else would like to share a book or resource? Well, you know, I was a teacher and I know how to call on people, so I'll ask Aisha.
Okay, I think that then Tenzin was raising her hand. If I don't want to cut.
Go ahead, Aisha, I'll go after you.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Ben Tenzin. If I was going to just recommend one or two things, there's a beautiful book called Reclaim Your Heart by Yasmin Mogahed, and she talks very much about us not being so attached to things and more looking at our inner selves to see what truly makes us happy. And since it is Ramadan and nobody gets to go to the mosque, everyone has posted a lot of really great lectures and Quranic readings online. My favorite is the Los Angeles Women's Mosque, because you don't usually get to hear women recite the Quran and preach to just other sisters. So if you'd like an Islamic resource that's lovely to visit, I recommend the Women's Mosque of America.
Very good. Okay, we'll go on with the Venerable Tenzin.
So there's a Buddhist nun who's quite popular called Pema Chodron, an American Buddhist nun, and she's written a lot of books. I pulled out two: When Things Fall Apart, Hard Advice for Difficult Times, appropriate title, and also Comfortable with Uncertainty, which is a kind of collection of very short 1 or 2 page, you know, really, really practical, very down to earth. And so anything by Pema Chodron, but those are two that are especially kind of relevant to what we're going through right now. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Reverend?
Well, I was thinking more, so for instance, I have a 4-year-old grandson that's sheltering in place with his mother, my daughter, and my son-in-law, and they're both supposed to be working full-time, and they're kind of going crazy dealing with that. So one of the books that I've recently read is Bless This Mess. It's by a pastor that's now in Berkeley, Reverend Molly Finney-Basket, and a psychologist, and they talk about incorporating a modern guide to faith and parenting in a chaotic world. And they wrote this before this current pandemic, but I think it's so relevant, especially for the parents that I see, even the parents in my church. They're having the hardest time because they're just with their kids 24/7, and it's hard to be the parent and the teacher and all that. So, and then the other book that I really, really enjoy, and this is a book of poetry, and I don't know if you've heard of John O'Donoghue, a Catholic priest, actually, no longer alive, from Ireland, and this is called To Bless the Space Between Us. And I find reading poetry something that gets me out of my normal mindset, and I highly recommend his poetry and other poetry to read during this time, because we can go to a really special place with that.
Okay, thank you. And even though I wasn't asked, I want to share a book also. Can you see this? It's called The Grapes of Wrath. I read this when I was 10 years old, which was 62 years ago. And for those of you who have read the book, you know it's a story about the Okies from Oklahoma who were migrant workers and came to California, where they experienced a lot of discrimination and were not valued at all. And so they felt powerless. And it just reminds me about here in Santa Cruz County, we still have migrant farm workers who are also devalued and discriminated. And just want us to remember that most of them are immigrants from Mexico, but now they're considered essential workers because they feed our nation. So grapes of wrath. So with that, I'm going to thank you all for sharing those resources and books and all your previous comments on our questions. And so I will now go to questions and answers. And so the first question says, how does one discover their spiritual gifts, especially when the opportunities to get out there are limited? And
Ooh, I
okay,
have an idea.
Okay, Reverend, go ahead.
So at least within the Christian tradition, one way you can actually find out and discover your spiritual gifts is to read the Bible. But there actually is an online link, and I'll get that to our facilitators after this program. There's an online way to take a spiritual gifts survey within the structure that Paul lays out in the book of Corinthians. So I'd highly recommend taking it and doing it and see where your gifts are. And then afterwards, you can call any of us if you want to talk more about some of the gifts that you might discover that you have. That would be my answer to that question.
Very good. Are there any one of you, the rest of you wanting to answer that question about spiritual gifts? Okay.
I would just, yeah, I mean, sure. So I know for me, it's true. So when you're trying to be of service, when you're trying to help out, whatever that could be through prayer, or that could be through some kind of action. I think you're going to discover, God's going to reveal to you maybe what your strengths are. But, I would encourage people to try to develop all the spiritual gifts. I think love is like a summary title. If we're all trying to become loving people. We're born, we're babies. And by the end of our life, hopefully we've learned to be loving in any kind of circumstance. And so by having all the gifts together will mean that you're going to be the most loving possible. So maybe even also to work on the things that you think you might be not so good at, might not have, to pray to God for those other gifts that you think you might not have, and to try to develop those. One resource that's online that I found useful, that you won't have to try to find, some way of service at this point in time. It's called Clifton's Strengths Finder, Clifton Strengths Finder. And so if you Google that, it'll take you to a link, and I think you pay like $18. And I found it to be very accurate. You take this survey, and it kind of concludes what are your top 5 strengths. And I found it to be very accurate.
Very good. Okay. Aisha or Venerable Tenzin, do you want to address this about spiritual gifts? Okay, I'll move on to the next question. While I enjoy being home with my family and I'm grateful for this time, we are stressed about money. Do any of you have suggestions about how to get through this stress? Thoughts about it?
I think stress is a natural way to feel. So first, you're completely valid in how you feel. That's a way that so many folks are feeling right now, and I hope that that you have folks around you that you can reach out to, either to talk about the stress or perhaps to help you with food or different things like that. I think when we talk about gifts that we have to give to the world, sometimes those folks who are organizing food drives, they want to help, and they want to be able to help you get through this. When it comes to stress, I try to remember that while we feel like everything is unknown now, everything was already unknown. It's just our schedule got all topsy-turvy, and we lost confidence that we knew what was going to happen, or we could predict what was going to happen. And I think in Islam, we say, actually also Jesus in the Bible says that God cares for even the birds. So of course he will care for you. And when I worry too much, that's what I try to remind myself of, that when I put my faith in Allah, that Allah never lets me down, that right when I need help, the help comes to me. And that we're all thinking about you, and hopefully you have people who can hold you in their prayers and their thoughts, because that often is a place of solace for me.
Okay. Anybody else wants to address?
Yeah, I'd like to, I think sometimes when I hear Aisha speak, I think she's actually a Buddhist in a hijab, because it's very much like what I'd say. And part of it is, like she said, anxiety is a natural response to uncertainty. And what we're experiencing right now is just massive, probably more collective and individual uncertainty about every aspect of our lives than we've ever experienced before. And so it is really, really natural. Sometimes, though, we have extra anxiety because we think it's going to last forever. And just like uncertainty is just one of the ways that reality functions, it can work in our favor too. Like this sort of level of uncertainty that we're feeling right now, and just the stuckness and the shelter at home, it's not going to last forever. Things are going to change. And so sometimes I think our anxiety can be an extra exaggeration of like, oh, this will never end. It'll just be like this week kind of forever. And so maybe reminding ourselves too that this too will change into something else soon, and it's natural that we're feeling like this, but it's not going to be like we're going to be living like this for 5 years. It may be a while. It's already been a lot longer than a lot of us thought, but it really won't be forever.
That's for sure. We're hoping for that. Father Jason, or
Sure. Yeah, because I don't think we have a next question yet after this one. So I think that, I know when I grew up, I discovered maybe around age of 15 or something, that there was something special to people who struggled financially, to their families, to their what was in their homes. And so there's a richness that comes from these kind of struggles. And so I would, to the person who's, like, I also validate that, and I have myself have been super worried about finances before. And I know for me, I would garden. I mean, I would go outside and just improve things that didn't really need to be improved, but it was your opportunity to do something that didn't cost any money, and you could make something better with your hands. And so whatever, if there's anything that you can do, from whittling or from, projects, beautification projects that don't cost any money, around the home, or in the home, or for a neighbor, or something, but some sort of activity that doesn't cost a lot, but that you're bringing something good into the world. And you can just know that as you go through this difficulty, something inside of you, a richness, is growing, and that those are some things that you'll never get. If you're a very wealthy person and everything has come easy to you, sometimes those spiritual riches are super hard to develop. But when you're struggling, they can come very easily.
Yeah, true.
And I'd also like to answer that the question. I think it was Ken that offered that to us, and thank you for sharing that with us. We really appreciate your openness about that, and I think that there's a lot of other people who feel the same way. I will tell a little story. I had this story that I heard once with a man that was in a flood, and he was on top of the roof, and the water came up, and he was just on the very edge of the roof, and he a boat came by, and they said, we can rescue you, come on in and get in the boat. And the guy goes, no, I'm waiting for God to speak to me, and God will help me. And then a helicopter comes by, and they put the rope down, and they say, get on, the flood is coming, get on the rope and we'll save you. And the guy goes, no. And then something else comes, and they're offering to help him, and he goes, no, it's going to be God. And the guy dies in the flood, and he gets to heaven, and he said, God, I was left there, and and there was nothing I could do. And God basically says, I sent you the guy in the boat, and I sent you the helicopter, and I sent you the other people. So this is a horrible time. I mean, because of, in many, many ways. But what I would say to you, Ken, is that look for any possible resources, any way that you can get help. And sometimes that may be asking for help. Look, I don't know if you have access to the internet, because I have families in my church. Well, you're on this now, so maybe through your phone. But you know, look for resources, ways you can get money, food through Second Harvest, ways to make it take some of that stress in practical ways. United Methodists are typically pretty practical in how they help. They do a lot of work in disasters, you know, Katrina and all those kinds of things. So I would assess your, I mean, be realistic, assess your family budget and try to see if there's ways you can bring it down to be a little tighter on the money, and look for other programs where you might be able to get help. Because sometimes we just need to ask it, and that may be the way that God can help you, is by you actually looking for other resources to try to help with that in this time of the pandemic when we're not sure. And also to assure your family. I mean, we have the love, but then if you need money for rent, what do you do? And I know that particularly Santa Cruz County, I don't know if you're in this local area, but there are some resources out there with either food, rent. There's laws now that you can't just be immediately evicted, at least in Watsonville and the county and so on. So I would look for those resources as sort of proactive ways you can help maybe accept that or deal with that stress in a way that maybe brings a little more peace.
Thank you. There are no more questions for the audience, but I'll pose a question to all four of you. This local jurisdictions, be it the city or the county or even districts, make policy. And I'm wondering, I want to ask each one of you, to what extent, if any, do any of you reach out or partner with those local jurisdictions in terms of trying to address what we're going through right now? So how about Reverend Robin?
Well, we were, through COPA, we were very involved when the city council considered, and I know you were part of that discussion, Rebecca. It's hard for me to call you Rebecca. I think of you as mayor. But we were part of the community response for that online Zoom meeting that you had, and some of the input to say, yes, we know people, we actually know people that were having serious problems, both landlords and tenants. And so to have an opportunity to try to influence that policy and try to help people in concrete ways is very, very important to us as a congregation. And it also, getting back to Ken's question, sometimes when we can help someone else, that helps us. So I would say that it's not that we have to be involved in everything, because if you sit there and watch the news all day, you're going to get totally stressed out and it's horrible. But at least in a deliberate way, trying to figure out where God is calling you or us to serve and perhaps help in terms of policy and giving our input. If I know someone, in fact, I have staff that are having problems that can't pay their rent for different reasons. So, you know, how can you make a difference in policy and try to give that kind of feedback and not say it's someone else's job, but that we can be part of that as a faith community.
Okay. How about you, Father Jason?
Is my mic working? Someone said it's not working again.
No, it's working. We can hear you.
Okay. Gosh, what was the question?
The question was in terms of
How it worked? Okay, I'm sorry to cut you off. Well, thanks be to God. We're the Catholic parishes in the area are pretty well organized. And so all the kind of governmental discussions go through our bishop's office. So I know our bishop has been, even through the collection of bishops in California, have been speaking directly to Governor Newsom's office. And so, we're trying to, we're going to be completely cooperative, but, we would love to be able to have services again. And so, trying to, we just listen to what's put out through either Watsonville or through Santa Cruz County right now here in Watsonville, and we just follow it to the letter. And our bishop wants us to do this, and we know that it's all the whether it's all these religious and faith tradition groups, we're all wanting the same thing. We number one, we want the health, but number two, I guess we just want this. We want to be able to go back to serving the people as quickly as possible. So, you have the resources, the governments have the resources with the medical doctors and stuff like that. And so we respectfully wait. But I know through our bishop's office, this is really how we're kind of coordinating with local governments and the wider governments.
Well, I'd like to address Father Jason through St. Patrick's Parish. You've been doing a lot of things regarding the census, and it's very important right now because we can't go door to door to make sure that they're filling out those census. So can you tell us, share with us what you're doing, what your parish is doing regarding the census?
Well, we want to do whatever you want us to do, Mayor.
Yeah. And you have.
Yeah.
Good point.
Well, with respect to the census, we do happen to have a good following on Facebook, and so we will be placing a video ad for our people to see, and we've been waiting to do that because we've been trying to get our own ducks in a row with our live stream masses and things. But yes, the census is very important. The resources to help people are going to come from knowing how many people are here. That's going to be what level of support and help we have available to people is by knowing that. So of course, like you, I encourage people to complete the census. So we did ours. We had 2 locations that by law we have to do it, and we did it knowing that it was a good thing to do.
And I just want to add, because you might have forgotten, you also allowed us to have a census booth at your annual downtown festival that you had. And I know I've heard you on Sundays. Oh, and this is a disclaimer. I attend I attend Mass every Sunday. And Father, I am participating in Mass on YouTube every Sunday with you. And I'm still learning from your homilies. But I have heard you at Mass often remind everybody to do the census. So I thank you for that. So how about you, Venerable Tenzin? Do you reach out to the local jurisdictions?
So I've been involved for a couple of years with a group called Faith in Action that's quite similar to COPA, and have been trying to spread the word and really kind of sign petitions and really try and push around issues relating to homelessness and incarceration and immigration in particular. So that's the way I've been, personally involved. Yeah.
Good. And you, Aisha?
I think the Muslim community here locally tends to be pretty small. It depends on where we are. In larger cities where there's a lot more Muslims, we do a lot more. It's been wonderful in the last few years to see more representation of Muslims in federal government and other minority faiths. That's been really nice. I think locally, we often work with the Santa Cruz City and county police, both keeping our folks safe and working to sort of increase understanding with folks. And our members do a lot of volunteering in the community. That's kind of a part of the Islamic creed, that you should volunteer or give back in charity. So I don't know that we're involved a lot in particular politics. I think we tend to shy away from that. But in public support, we're really big on that.
And that's the point that I wanted to make up. Yes, city politics is political, but nonetheless, in terms of policy, we're here to serve our community, and you're part of our community. And so you have to be in conversation with us. So with that, I guess that ends our question and answers, and it ends our session. And so I want to thank each one of you for your participation. It's been wonderful. And I guess I just say goodbye now.
And on behalf of the Santa Cruz Public Libraries and the Watsonville Public Library, I'd like to thank everyone for joining this final session in our series and for supporting library programming in general. This entire series is going to be available on our YouTube channel, and we'll also release the book recommendations and resources soon. So I'd like to also thank our panelists for sharing your thoughts and your advice with all of us. We are grateful for each one of you. And finally, Mayor Garcia, thank you for your moderation. Take care, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.